This video tells the story of Compton through three very different visions of its water. One that represents the ambition of the ruling class, another represents the fantasies of the creative class, and one of the realities facing the working class. By showing how water shaped Compton's past, I explain why it became the center of conflict in its present, and what it means for Compton's future. Chapter 2. In the Name of Water, How Water Made and Unmade Compton. In 1867, a group of white settlers moved down from the more developed north, seeking cheaper land and better opportunities. What they decided was a piece of land right next to the Southern Pacific Railroad, a piece of land sitting between two meandering rivers, with moist and fertile soil, signaled great abundance of water beneath its ground. The connection to the railroad ensured timely supply of cheap seasonal labor from the north, and swift shipment of ripe produce south to the port and east to the rest of the country. With the abundance of water that fertilized the soil, irrigated the crops, and fed the families, Compton soon established itself as one of the major agricultural centers in Southern California. Things started to change with the outbreak of World War I, Compton's independent water source, and the discovery of oil in its neighboring towns attracted big ore industries into the area. Massive new housing development quickly followed, which then brought large influxes of white working-class families employed in nearby factories and oil fields. As Compton's population grew from a little over 1,000 in the 1920s to over 66,000 in the 1950s, more properties were built, more business established, and more streets paved. The abundance of water, which made Compton a city in the first place, was becoming to be seen as a menace. Finally, in the 1950s, after several consecutive devastating floods, the U.S. Army Corps stepped in, took control of Los Angeles' entire 51 miles of waterways, and turned it into a concretized flood control channel. But, here's the but. Remember this photo? Because of significant upwelling from underground water at the southern end of Compton Creek, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers decided to leave this tiny portion of Compton Creek unpaved. And this, half a century later, became Compton's most promising uncontested site today. Since the early 2000s, after decades of neglect and underinvestment, Compton Creek remained inaccessible, polluted, and dangerous. However, this tiny portion of soft-bottomed Compton Creek, with its unusual amount of green, caught the attention of a group of nature-loving environmentalists who saw, I quote, a forgotten jewel, a glimpse of what Greater Los Angeles inland waterways used to be, and a symbol of what we can hopefully bring back on a larger scale, unquote. Since the mid-1990s, nonprofits like the legendary Friends of the LA River and its younger comrade, Heal the Bay, have convinced the media and California's politicians that LA River needs and is worth saving. Compton Creek, as a tributary of the LA River that cuts through many of the most impoverished neighborhoods in southern Los Angeles, didn't receive much attention until 2003, when Joe Edmiston and his mighty MRCA took interest in the soft-bottomed Compton Creek. MRCA, as the most powerful conservation agency in California, owns and runs 75,000 acres of parkland, which equals almost half the size of San Francisco. But almost all of it, unsurprisingly, are located in the more affluent neighborhoods in northern Los Angeles. So when Joe's MRCA laid eyes on Compton, it received a big and warm welcome from LA County and Compton city government, who for decades has been struggling with debt and financial troubles. With the money and political power brought by the MRCA, the ruling class of Los Angeles quickly formed an alliance with environmental nonprofits such as Heal the Bay and landscape architects at Mille Lerner Studio, who proposed a series of studies, master plans, and renderings showcasing an urban oasis that meets all the fantasies and imaginaries of the creative class. In 2010, after a decade of campaigning and millions of taxpayer dollars gathered and spent, MRCA announced a $4 million acquisition of the 8.5 acres of land along the south bottom Compton Creek. The announcement was quickly followed by the EPA, who declared that Compton Creek, along with the entire 51 miles of the Elbe River, to be re-recognized as navigable waterways. It was a big day for Los Angeles environmentalists and landscape architects who had spent decades going through cycles after cycles of study, design, and reviews, and seeing their great plans being put back on the shelves. The land acquisition and EPA's navigable waterway designation means that Los Angeles is finally taking back control of its rivers. However, just 3 years after the big announcement, the U.S. Army Corps declared Compton Creek's existing levee system unacceptable. In 2019, the Corps posted an award of $529,000 contract for removing sediment and vegetation from the Compton Creek. So the fight continues between the ruling class, who knows that parks and rivers bring in votes and investment, the creative class, who wants their plants, the birds, the bike path, the kayaks, the afternoon walks in nature, and the technocrats, who are determined that no matter how unpopular it is to kill the urban oasis dream, flooding is something Los Angeles cannot risk, especially when an alternative drainage plan does not exist. So what does this all mean for Compton and its future? It means that in the name of water, the creative class and the ruling class keep utilizing millions of taxpayer dollars to promote an urban oasis dream that distract attention and resources from and disguises the urgency in addressing the most essential needs of its peoples. It means that in the name of water, thousands of working class, marginalized, and underrepresented communities of Compton will continue to suffer from its polluted waters, the crumbling basic infrastructures, and heightening risk of displacement. As STS scholar Ruha Benjamin once said, imagination is a contested side of action. For many of us designers, planners, and architects, imagination is our politics of action, a resource, a battleground of input and output of social order. In fact, we should acknowledge that many people are forced to live inside someone else's imagination, the imagination of some of our most successful peers and colleagues in the discipline. And one thing we have to come to grips with is how the nightmares of that many people are forced to endure are the underside of elite fantasies about nature, profit, and progress.